All right, I got my glasses on, which means we need some serious business today. We're going to do some great discussion about estrogen dominance, about menopause, perimenopause, about how our bodies compensate when we have a hormone imbalance. If you guys can go ahead while we're getting started here, if you just let me know where you're from, that would be amazing. I'd love to know too, if you're in our current fast metabolism cleanse group, if you're currently doing the cleanse right now, maybe if you're one of our coaches, one of our fast metabolism coaches, maybe let me know if you're a member of our private membership fast metabolism group. For sure, let me know if you're new here, if you came in on the buddy system, if you're a friend of someone that's been a long time FMDer. Denver, Chicago. And if you guys can also, if I'm going into a topic that feels really pertinent to you and you want me to go, we've been teaching a lot of classes lately. And so I've been telling my students a lot, if there's something that's important to you, if there's something that makes you ponder even more, if there's something that feels like it pertains to you, please make sure you make a comment. I will do my best. My team's here to kind of help me pull out some questions. We have a lot of people that wrote in questions. I will address those. But please make sure that you comment, because we can either circle back around later and get those answered or use those for our next thing. It's the most important thing to me when we're talking about the metabolism, and especially how we metabolize our hormones, is that everybody feels like they understand this process, because our hormones are chemical signalers. They do chemical signaling to affect everything in our bodies. One of the things that was most interesting is we polled a lot of individuals about what they understand about their sex hormones, about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. What happens during times of fertility when our bodies are able to conceive or are conceiving? What happens to our bodies when we're going through the onset of our menstrual cycles? And what happens when we start to go into perimenopause and menopause? And so the first thing that I want to talk about is I want you to know that as chemical signalers, I always tell you the metabolism affects every aspect of your life. I want you to think of your hormones as those conductors of the orchestra of your life, the signalers that tell the body how and what to perform. We have all kinds of signalers. We have adrenal hormones, which are adaptive, tell our body to shiver when we're cold, tell our bodies to jump when one of our kids scares us. We have signaling hormones that tell our body, the autonomic nervous system that tell our body to sleep when it's dark, to wake when it's light. We're sensitive in our hormones to the food and the nutrients we put in, to the environment that we're exposed to. So all of these hormones, and it's really hard because we can see like hair, skin, bone, teeth. We can see these physical aspects of our bodies, but our hormones sometimes feel a little bit etherical, a little bit kind of hard to grasp. In Chinese medicine, they talk about the shin or the spirit of the body, right, being our hormones. Ayurvedic describes it one way, and from an endocrine perspective, we talk about it as chemical signalers. So I want to talk a little bit about the conversation that's going on right now in how our bodies adapt to changes in our lives. And we're going to narrow it down a little bit and talk a lot about perimenopause. So when we start to have an adaptation or a change in our hormones, menopause itself, and postmenopause. Now, if you're an individual that's in childbearing years and you're dealing with any kind of fertility struggles, a lot of our research into how to regulate the cycles, if it's hormone-based and not physiological-based, does come from the perimenopausal time periods or studies. We have a variety of different hormones in our bodies, but we have things that are called estrogens. We'll use the letter E for that. Progesterones, we'll use the letter P for that. And the testosterones. Those are our three primary sex hormones. Raise your hand, give me a thumbs up if everybody's heard of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. You guys, I get some hearts, thumbs up. Okay. In our estrogens, we have three types, right? We have E1, E2, and E3. 1, 2, and 3. Just so I know where everybody's at, give me a heart if you're familiar that your estrogens, and women and men have estrogens. Your estrogens, there's actually an E4. When you're pregnant, it gets stimulated by the fetus. But for today, we're going to talk about E1, E2, and E3. Okay? Yes. Wendy knows about estrogens. Denise knows about estrogens. So all of us have this in common. We primarily have three types of estrogens. E2 is what's considered the most potent form of estrogen. And E2 is what we normally talk about when people say, I have estrogen dominance, although there's some real myths about that. And we're going to break those down. I feel estrogen excess. I'm estrogen deficient. Usually when we're talking about estrogen and a physician runs a lab on estrogen, we're normally looking at E2. The thing that's important for us to note about E2 is that there's certain times in our lives where E2 is high, scoot over here, and certain times in our lives where E2 is low. So if we look at our childbearing years, right, and we talk about day 1 being the onset of period, okay, day 14 approximately being when we ovulate, and day 28 being approximately when our cycle, right, ends. And then we go back to the first day of our period. And remember, the first day of your period is the day 1 when you either spot or have bleeding. That's day 1. A lot of times when we talk in our community, I say, let's have your hormones tested, especially dealing in the fertility world. Let's have your hormones tested on day 3 of your cycle. So I'm going to get a little different color here so I can give you guys an idea of what happens in, I'm going to use the term, a normal cycle, right? Let's say you're ovulating. Let's say your fertility is good. Let's just scoot this over, see if I can figure this out a little bit here. So what'll happen is I'm going to do our estrogens, our progesterones, and our testosterones, right? We get a blip here in our estrogens right when we ovulate, and then we come back down. In our, we actually get a secondary little blip here. Just so you know, there's a secondary little blip here. And this is going to be really important when I talk to you guys about what happens when you're going through perimenopause and menopause. So this is before you start having any of the hot flashes and the running into walls and the jaw cracking. We're going to talk about all of those things. Our progesterones, typically we get a little bit of a blip here. We get a nice big spike here. And our testosterones, so let's do this. This is progesterone. This is E2 that we're looking at right here, right? And this one is our testosterone. We typically run a pretty level distribution of testosterone. What happens though is both our progesterone and our testosterone can be converted into estrogen, especially during this time of ovulation. It can be actually back converted if your estrogen level is low. So even in an individual that is having adequate periods, 28-day cycles, we want to look at this because sometimes we're consuming our testosterone and our progesterone. So our testosterone and our progesterone can be converted into estrogen. Okay. So if you're going about life and they say you're having a normal cycle, it's every 28 days, but you're having things like orbital acne, you're having back acne, you're having significant PMS. It is really important that we test all 3 of these and that you encourage your physician to test all of these 3 things, because even if your E2 appears to be normal, it can be snatching the hormones, progesterone and testosterone. Now, if you are an individual that struggled with PMS or your periods started, like say you were 14, 13, 16, and your periods were what we call scanty, so they started and they were irregular, you're going to typically be an individual that's going to have more of a difficult time in perimenopause and menopause because you became the master snatcher at back converting testosterone or progesterone. What do I mean by back converting? Back converting is when you take a hormone like testosterone and you remodel it. You synthesize estrogen, E2, the dominant estrogen, from testosterone or progesterone. Remember this fact, guys, because when you're talking about hormone replacement therapy and you're wanting to know which hormones to layer in, how to begin to layer things in, how to layer things in appropriately, you're going to want to talk about the capacity for you to be a back converter. Again, if you're having normal cycles or you're perimenopause and you're still having cycles, even if they're irregular, the definition for menopause is no periods for 12 months. Typically in my practice, we talk a lot about no period for 6 months. You might have this like low period, real heavy that comes along, or something real scanty and real light. But if you are still having a period which your progesterone level gets high enough to allow the uterus to slough, causing the bleeding, we still consider you in perimenopause. And again, in my world, until about 6 months, some practices say 12 months. Okay, I feel like I just laid out like a bunch of stuff about our cycles as women, about periods, about things that happen in our body. So far, guys, does anybody have any questions? You guys all gathering this. It's really important because when I jump into perimenopause and menopause, we've got to understand what a normal cycle looks like and some suspicion if you might have been what we call a hormone snatcher during the fertile years of your life. Anybody feel like maybe they were a hormone snatcher? Maybe they back converted progesterone and testosterone into an E2. Give a thumbs up. Tell me a little bit about what that felt like for you and how that goes. So I'm going to answer some questions as we go along. Lisa was just asking, how do you get all three hormones tested? Let's talk a little bit about what happens. I got a link here. Good. We will screenshot this. We can post this. But again, the things that I want you to know is that we usually have during ovulation an estrogen E2 surge. We usually have a progesterone surge coming into your periods. This is a really magnesium dependent, by the way, guys. And this is really fatty acid dependent. So if you get PMS, right, going into your period, you are an individual that wants to check out some magnesium. If you are an individual that has a rough ovulation, if mid-cycle you feel a significant change, either in body temperature, we do this when we look at fertility, or in fluffiness of the body, you're going to want to really look. These are little hints about fatty acids. If you had a difficult time with ovulation, if your FSH went too high, in our fertility world, we look a lot at fatty acids right here in this ovulation perspective. And then remember that I'm telling you that testosterone runs pretty flat and it's pretty constant through the cycle. And again, we have that big spike of progesterone towards the latter half of the cycle. So normally when a person's ovulating and a person's in their fertile years, the physicians will only check an E2. However, when we look at where our estrogens come from and how our bodies metabolize those estrogens, it's really important when you think about doing a blood test. So E2 that we have here is primarily manufactured in our ovaries, in our uterus, and sometimes in our breast tissue. Okay. So when we have a uterus and ovaries, we have not had a hysterectomy, or maybe we've had a partial hysterectomy and we still have our ovaries left. Our body produces E2 pretty efficiently, again, in the ovaries, the uterus, and the breast tissue. When we have difficulty or we stop ovulating, like in perimenopause, there's another hormone that steps in that's called E1. So a lot of times docs are only testing E2 when individuals are still having periods and what appears to be that they're ovulating normally. Again, because of the risk factor of individuals back converting progesterone and testosterone, again, really bad PMS, scanty periods, acne is a dead giveaway. those are the individuals that in order to get that surge so that you can actually ovulate, you're going to steal these other two hormones, right? Those individuals, and always in my practice, we also test E1. Because what happens with E1 is it compensates in order to balance these deficiencies, especially when we start to see a progesterone deficiency. So I'm going to say that again. If you're having labs and you're still having a cycle, and the physician only tests E2, and you have a low progesterone, there is a very good chance that you are producing E1 in order to compensate for the progesterone and or testosterone deficiency. So we always test, even in a woman that's cycling, and I'm doing this early with my daughter, young. I always test E2 and E1, and we want to look at those ratios. Okay, that was a lot to digest, but I've got a 10-course meal for you. So again, guys, thumbs up, hearts, everybody following along. I don't see questions, but if you have questions, be sure to post them. So I'm going to just get rid of this for just a second. Remember what this looks like though, okay? Because we're going to now show you what happens in perimenopause and in menopause. So when we start to go into menopause, we have all these crazy symptoms. Hot flashes is definitely one of them. We will talk about that. We have things like TMJ, gritting of the teeth, restless sleep. And that's because our bodies lose the benefit of E2. So again, we're going to put E2 up here. And we lose the benefit of having that super spike during ovulation where all of the tissues get kind of hypersaturated with E2. And remember, when E2 is healthy, our bodies promote collagen, elastin. It's actually E3 during pregnancy, but those estrogens allow our tummies to stretch huge when we have pregnancies. They allow for flexibility as kids. I don't know anybody, but I was super flexible. I could do the splits really easy before menopause. Now it seems like stretching is a daily and I guess I could say multi-time event. Did anybody else notice that their flexibility went down a little bit as they went and entered the change? Some of that collagen and elastin, lack of tissue saturation also is why we get, the jaws that pop, the knees that pop, you get out of bed and the elbow pops, that elasticity starts to decline a little bit. But we're going to talk about estrogen metabolism and how our bodies can actually manufacture our sex hormones more efficiently. That's why all of us are doing the 10-day cleanse. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Okay, so I want to show you what the hormone cycle looks like when you're actually going through perimenopause and menopause. And so really when individuals are having pretty rough symptoms, a lot of times they'll say you're in perimenopause because there's so much more fluctuation and variation during perimenopause than there is menopause. So I'm going to say this is perimenopause. So you're still having periods. Your E2 levels started to drop. If you're a snatcher or a back converter, your progesterone level is also starting to drop. And oftentimes you will have an almost non-existent testosterone level. So they'll say, or two things can happen, or your testosterone level goes through the roof because your E1 goes through the roof, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. So this is menopause, right? And this is a before, okay? This is still when you're cycling, you're still ovulating, you're still having regular periods. So I'm going to take our progesterone level here at a normal level, and I'm going to take, let me compare this for a second. I'll correct progesterone a little bit better. Let's say we have really good hormones. We're not doing any snatching. Our progesterone level is nice. Our estrogens level is nice. When we come into perimenopause, our E2 levels do this. When we go into menopause, our E2 levels do this. They're almost non-existent. This is E2. Remember, E2 is produced in the ovaries, the uterus, primarily the breast tissue, right? Our progesterone levels get very depleted. And they're typically depleted for a lot of reasons. One, we have less production and less stimulus because we're not ovulating and we're not having regular cycles. Remember that surge that happens right before our periods. The other thing that happens is this adaptation or irregularity in E2 consumes the heck out of our progesterone. A lot of people that do hormone replacement therapy when they're going through perimenopause, they will actually supplement with progesterone and sometimes even supplement with testosterone. So you'll see testosterone drop significantly. The little thing that sneaks in here, though, that is affecting a lot of us is that our bodies, in order to try to keep homeostasis, because remember, E2 estrogens are signaling hormones. So they signal things like our hearts to beat. That's why sometimes we get irregular heartbeat during menopause. They stimulate body temperature regulation. That's why oftentimes we can get sweaty during menopause. They stimulate our body's ability to sleep deeply. That's why sometimes we have irregularity or inconsistency in sleep. They are a signaling hormone for our adaptogenic hormones like the adrenals, right? E2, again, is the strongest, most powerful estrogen. So it is very powerful in keeping a nice level mood. It is very powerful in keeping anxiety at bay. When it is like this, though, as you can imagine, it's almost very normal for you to feel anxiety, potential depression, agitation. But there's ways that we can actually level this out and make the transition a lot more effective and efficient. So what starts to happen here, and I'm going to kind of draw a squiggly line, but we start to see E1 elevate. Again, why does E1 elevate? And where in the world is E1 produced? Remember when we talked about the 3 estrogens? We have E1, which is very, very small in our body, especially when we're having normal cycles, good adaptation. We're not an estrogen snatcher, meaning we're not back converting from progesterone and testosterone. We have good ovulations. Our periods started at a reasonable time, at 12. They were every 28 days. We got pregnant super easy. We don't have PMS. Those imagery that it wasn't my personal experience, right? I was definitely a hormone snatcher. E2 is very, very small. When E1 is very, very small during that time. Primarily E2, which is the strongest estrogen, is the dominant estrogen, and E3 is reserved for when we're pregnant. So as we start to go into perimenopause, this hormone that's very quiet, E1, starts to rear its head. Because our bodies have to have signaling hormones. We have to be able to have a heartbeat, peristalsis of the bowel. We need to sleep. We need to adapt to our environment. We need to not freeze on a 70-degree day, right? E2 starts to elevate. So the lower our progesterone is, the lower our testosterone is, and the more irregular our E2 is, the higher E1 will elevate. I'm going to give you guys just a second to guess where in the world is E1 produced. There's a lot of different areas, but there's 2 primary areas. Let me show this to you again. This is you before going into menopause, before going into perimenopause. This is you in perimenopause. So the definition is you're still having some periods. Maybe they're heavy. Maybe you're having a lot of blood clots. Maybe they're irregular. Your sleep's starting to disrupt. Your body temperature is starting to disrupt. Maybe you're losing some hair here and growing some hair here. Maybe you have a little bit of orbital acne. Maybe you're noticing more anxiety, more agitation. Maybe your libido is down. Remember, the uterus, the ovaries and the breast tissue, that you're losing some breast volume. Maybe those kinds of things are starting to show. This is perimenopause, okay? And this is the most irregular time from a hormone signaling perspective. And then suddenly you go, wait a minute, I feel hormonal, but supposedly all of these are low and down. And that's this E2 creeping in, E1 creeping in. Sorry, guys, E1. I'm going to give you one more guess. Does anybody know where is E1 produced? Don't Google it. Don't Google it. I'm going to give you a hint. Sometimes some of us, as we go through menopause, find it really easy to gain volume in these particular cells, right? These cells go maybe like from this to this. There are adipocytes or our fat cells. So when our body is struggling with erratic E2, low progesterone, low testosterone, it survives by producing E1 in our fat cells and in these little guys. You're going to see my terrible artistic ability. These little guys that lie right over the top of the kidneys that are called our adrenals. Okay, I'm going to recap this for you one more time really quick. Now I'm going to stand over here. Whoops, and maybe I'll stand over here. So, as our bodies go into perimenopause, our ovaries stop ovulating, right? We stop creating eggs to be fertilized. And when that happens, our body craves E2, which is that really strong estrogen. Because remember, it is a neurostimulator. It is a bone density stimulator. It is a heart health stimulator. It can be pro-inflammatory if it's not metabolized efficiently. It can be anti-inflammatory when it is in homeostasis and cycled appropriately. So in order for our body's sheer survival mechanism, when we're in a state of imbalance, what do? We are so smart. We produce more fat cells and we deplete our adaptive cells or our adaptive hormones from the adrenals. So where does that leave us? That leaves us in a situation where hormone-based weight gain is really, really easy. The other thing that it leaves us in a situation is where our adaptive state, let's say by summer, right, is really, really depleted. So as our bodies go through a change, so what do we do from a hormone replacement therapy perspective? You've got all kinds of theories out there. We work in our practice a lot with people that do a variety of different HRT. I'm not a big pelleted person. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm going to get a lot of people that aren't really thrilled with me. Because with the pelleting, you get a constant state of whatever hormone it is that you pellet. Do you guys familiar with pelleting out there? Anybody raise your hand, thumbs up, go ahead and put the definition in there, contribute to the cause over here. So pelleting is when they take time release based hormones and they insert them just, usually down here, just below the skin surface so that the body can allow hormones to be secreted at a pretty steady state. Usually they're about 90 days in and then they redo them. The issue with pelleted hormones is that it creates a state like this and there's no adaptation. And remember, even when we're in menopause, we're done with our periods, we have adaptation in our E2, we have adaptation in our E1, and in order to feed that adaptation, we have to convert testosterone and progesterone to create a nice stable homeostasis. Okay, guys. Everybody up to speed on that because I'm going to throw a couple little curveballs in here. So let me just recap this. This is our E2, this is our progesterone, this is E1, this is testosterone. When we go into perimenopause and we're going through that change, right? And we have all of these signals. These are E2, our strongest estrogen, is our signals to lay down collagen, elastin, for memory and cognition, for heart, for inflammation. This is why we get a lot of allergies, a lot of gallbladder disease during menopause. This here, our body tries to create a homeostasis, oftentimes by back converting progesterone and testosterone. When we are done and we are fully in menopause, we still have that adaptation. It is not as extreme. So if anybody Hold on. Okay. So someone says, I just don't understand why my female OBGYN can't answer any of the questions regarding why am I gaining weight? You're gaining weight because you have a super smart body. I love your body. You are amazing. Squeeze it, hug it, all of its extra weight. Tell it, I love you. I'm going to be there in a minute. I'm going to support you to burn these excess fat. Do not be hard on yourself if this is what you're going through. But what you're going through is you have an elevation at E1. And the body's not metabolizing the estrogens efficiently. And so the only way to produce and make and compensate is to produce more fat cells, more adipocytes. Okay. There is a whole hormone cascade, and we can talk about this as well with globulin and inulin and adiponectin and leptin that I added inulin in there. Leave inulin out. We'll talk. That's another topic. Globulin, adiponectin, leptin, that are all things that also make you feel hungry when E1 is elevated and E2 is erratic, right? Especially if progesterone's really low. You're going to feel ravenous from 4 o'clock until you finally, if you can, go to bed, right? I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I do. And I work really hard on this. Okay. So what the heck do we do? So whether you do hormone replacement therapy or not, now let me tell you something. When I talked about doing where you're still cycling and you're still having regular periods, I love to see your labs tested. And I suggest you ask so that you know if you're a hormone snatcher or not. You ask for E1, E2, progesterone, testosterone, and a hormone that's called sex-binding hormone globulin. And we're going to talk about that one in just a second. So some physicians say, gosh, I only know how to test E2. Most of the time, they're not. I always test E3, and I'll tell you why I test E3, because I've had clients that have benign pituitary masses. And if we get an elevated FSH and LH, sorry, I don't want to totally science geek out, it saves me from not having to turn around, draw blood again, or run an E3. You shouldn't have an elevated E3 unless you're pregnant. However, there are some benign pituitary masses, and we get the most complex cases in our practice. So I always run an E3. Don't get too stressed out if you can't talk somebody into it, unless your FSH is like crazy and your LH, luteinizing hormone, and you're not ovulating. You're on day 3 of your period. Remember, you're not ovulating until day 14. So if your FSH is high, follicle stimulating hormone, which makes your follicle grow so that your ovary gets big and juicy and it drops an egg, you're luteinizing. Luteinizing is popping that to release the egg. If those are elevated on day 3, then we know there's a little bit of a problem somewhere in the feedback loop. So we will run an E3, but just ask for an E1, ask for an E2. If they say we only run E2s, go, you know what? I am having all kinds of symptoms. And remember, my team, please post this there, that we have these requests for cares. Fill this out before you go to the doctor. And it says, hey, doc, I want to let you know this is going on. I'm having symptoms such as orbital acne, restless leg, inability to sleep, inability to have an orgasm, vaginal dryness, hair on my chin, lack of hair on my head, especially in the crown, thinning of the eyebrows. Write it down. Because of this, I'd like you to test E2, which is the most powerful hormone in the estrogen class. It's one of the most signaling hormones that tells my heart to beat, my bowels to move, and my brain to sleep, right? But I also want you to check E1, because my hormones have been so wacky or feel so off. I want to make sure that I'm not producing extra estrogen in my fluffy areas and in my areas that are supposed to help with stress hormones, because I kind of feel like I might be. Ask, write it down, do your request for care, give it to your doctor ahead, send it to the office before, give it to the nurse. Ask. Okay. I always love to check, again, I'm going to just go over that, progesterone. And you always want it checked at the same time, because remember, your cycle does this. So if you, for example, we just had one in one of our classes, an individual was normal in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And I said, well, if you look at the labs, you look at the ratios, yeah, you're normal for estrogen in the first 3 days of your cycle, and progesterone, the day 18 of your cycle. Problem is, we drew all of your blood on day 3. So we want to look at it in the time and space. And you guys have to know this. I'm here for you, our membership community. You can ask us anything. I'm going to actually get to our member and our challenge questions here in 2 seconds. But you guys are the captain of the team, and I want you to stay and be healthy. Okay. I also mentioned testosterone. I like free and total, and I like a thing that's called sex-binding hormone globulin. And your doc will know what it is. If it isn't, write on your request for care, sex-binding hormone globulin, put a little link. He can look it up if he needs to. It's okay. You need to be the smartest person in the room because you live with yourself 24/7. So that makes you automatically the most knowledgeable person about the patient, right? Right. Okay. There are 2 other hormones that I typically run, and I always run them both in my premenopause, my perimenopausal, and in my menopausal clients. And that's the 2 that I just mentioned a second ago. One is follicle stimulating hormone, and one is luteinizing hormone. So FSH and LH. These are hormones from the pituitary gland that talk to the ovaries and tell the ovaries, hey, ovulate, or hey, drop an egg. Okay. Really important in individuals that have also had a complete hysterectomy because the messenger will still talk to the tissues. And if you have an elevated FSH, right, you're talking to the ovaries, and you have an elevated FSH, LH and FSH, right? Let me write this down. LH. So if your doc says, I don't know why you want to run these, we're not trying to get you pregnant, right? You're in menopause or you've had an ovectomy, you've had your ovaries removed, partial or complete hysterectomy. What in the world do you want your FSH and your LH? And what you're going to say is you're going to say, because if they're high, let me tell you what they're going to do if my ovaries aren't ovulating. They're going to be the ones that are going to stimulate this E1. And they're going to stimulate it in a big way. So when I have an individual that's having a difficult time metabolizing excess fat in the body, one of the first things that we look at is FSH and LH in case we don't capture E2 in the moment that it surges. I'm sorry, E1. Sorry, guys. I'm going to say that again. If you run your labs and you run an E2 and it's low because you're in menopause, they catch it here in a dip, but your progesterone's semi-normal. So if you're trying to balance in homeostasis, you should have a low E2 and a higher progesterone and a higher testosterone. If your E2 is like, okay, let's say you're not like 19 and maybe you're like 22 or 24. And that's kind of at the high end, you will see a lower progesterone and a lower testosterone. That's going to be the indicator if you're breaking down those accessory hormones to try to create a homeostasis. If you're trying to create balance and your E1's elevated, we're going to say, okay, we got it. We totally understand why the body's having difficult time losing weight. We totally understand that the E1 metabolites, you're saying grow fat cells, grow, squeeze adrenal glands, squeeze, let's tap her out, right? But there are times when this becomes a ghost, right? And this becomes a ghost because the E2 is typically low, that it makes the E1 also drag down and look low. And the way we find that ghost is we look for an elevated LH or FSH and a highly elevated. Now, when you go through menopause, your LH and your FSH go up, but they should be on the very bottom end of normal. In the perimenopause, there's 2 ratios or menopausal ratio. If they're on the high end, you know that the pituitary is telling the body to secrete cortisol and proliferate fat cells. Okay? All right, guys. What the heck are we going to do about this? So, everybody's got that? All right. I'm going to do one more graphic, and we're going to talk about trying and attempting to create a homeostasis in our hormones or adapting to our environment, whether we are in a state of fertility, a state of onset of periods, a state of perimenopause, or a state of postmenopause. So let me draw you another graphic where I'm going to go testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, hormones that are called glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and the all famous vitamin D. Can you guys see that? We have testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and vitamin D. Those of you that are doing our cleanse challenge, I know we're on a day where we are doing a lot of shakes and we're really working on liver cleanse, but this is going to get you over the hump and have you super fired up about what you're participating in right now. Okay. So we're going to call these hormones. They're actually called steroids. I know you guys have heard the word steroids with things like prednisone. I was on prednisone because of an autoimmune disorder, maybe anabolic steroids if you're trying to beef up illegally or something like that. And then this is called a sterol. Okay. So it's vitamin D is like a hormone, but it's not quite like a hormone, but it acts like a hormone in the body. What we want is a nice, unique level of homeostasis of these 6 things. Let me tell you, and I'm going to go up the chain here. Because I can't read my spelling. Okay, so when we have a proliferation of E1 or our E2 starts to dip, or we have what's called estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance does not mean that you have a high level of estrogen. It means that you have storage of estrogen. It means that you are not metabolizing estrogen, and it means that you are not creating a homeostasis in all of the hormones. So, okay, everybody okay here? It says their screen's freezing. This is a big concept, so I want to drop this one on you guys and see, okay, we're good to go. Okay, so this is what's called the cholesterol molecule. Think of this as fat. Our cholesterol molecule has sugars, triglycerides, so lipids. Our fat cells have triglycerides inside them. Our bodies convert fat into a masculine hormone called pregnenolone, which then produces testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and vitamin D. These 2 glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, they are a class of signaling hormones. I'm going to just give you a super brief on this. This is what leads to inflammation, allergies, insulin resistance. Mineralocorticoids is your bone mass, so bone density, your blood pressure, your heart rate, right? Your sodium, potassium. So like edema, swelling, things like that. And again, we talked about the 3 kinds of estrogens. We talked about progesterone and testosterone being great donors to help support estrogen. Okay. So the really important thing to create a homeostasis is that we work on the metabolism and how our body synthesizes or makes hormones and breaks down or catabolizes or breaks down hormones. This right here is what happens in our liver. A group of enzymes called cytochrome P450. And this exact area is how the 10-day metabolism plan was created. Many of you might not know this. I came up with the 10-day fast metabolism plan when a very close girlfriend of mine, we were both breastfeeding at the time, was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. We were both in our 30s. Again, we were both nursing, and we were doing research on her receptor positive for a particular type of cancer. She was estrogen dominant. She was converting E1 significantly. And we were looking at the enzymes, the cytochrome P450, and how we could reduce and create balance in these 6 hormone classes. It became really popular because a lot of celebrities used it for quick weight loss, to clean up their bodies, to clean up how our bodies metabolize things. But the secret here is the magic in it is that the nutrients, the N-acetylcysteine, the alpha lipoic acid, the probiotics, all of the things in it are designed to create homeostasis in this hormone metabolism feedback loop with a lot of focus on cytochrome P450. Okay. This is a class in itself, right, on hormone regulation. What a lot of people will notice, and this was the case for me when I was still cycling, when you do the 10-day cleanse, some people, their hot flashes completely go away when they're on the 10-day cleanse, right? We are helping the body be efficient at converting testosterone and progesterone into E2, the strongest estrogen, and lowering the ability or the need for the body to hyperproliferate E1. It's also why some people lose a lot of weight on the 10-day cleanse, because we say, hold on a minute, you need very little E2 once you've gone through menopause, as long as you have enough that you don't need to steal all of your progesterone and testosterone. You can stay at a really nice homeostasis. So the 10-day cleanse, we're doing a lot to lower the E1 levels or metabolize the E1 levels. I guess I'll say that. I'm going to throw in another caveat here, guys. Those of you that have had two issues. One, your gallbladder removed, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but the gallbladder is the sex hormone recycling power plant of the body. So when we don't have it, we have a hard time remodeling our hormones into an E2, right? We're not as efficient as remodeling. We also have a hard time of getting rid of extra E1. There are products like DIM, turmeric, which we have a lot of turmeric and DIM and metabolism DIM. There are things like the fatty acids, which are so important because they help with this first phase of metabolism in order to provide the building blocks for homeostasis in your hormones, right? So there are nutrients that you can use and incorporate. Excuse me, I think my hormones are getting a little frisky over here. Someone just told me, sorry guys, that you can use and incorporate so that your bodies can reach the homeostasis that it's striving for. I'm going to say that again. All of this that we talked about today, every hormone receptor site, every tissue in our body is nutrient dependent. And the health of it is dependent on the health of the nutrients. It is so common in our clinic to need to completely create a healthy food program and a powerful supplement program in order to nurture the body back to homeostasis. 9 times out of 10, the body wants to go into homeostasis. Sometimes, and that's that 10%, right? When the body isn't coming into homeostasis, we need to lean in a little bit. We need to listen a little bit more. We need to get more data and facts, and we need to find out where we can put a hyper supplement nutrient program in to evoke a change so that the body can come back into homeostasis. I'm going to say that again. Sometimes we're just trying to get the body unstuck. We get set in our ways, especially in hormone dysfunction. We have blood pressure that we cannot regulate. We have allergies that suddenly come on. We have onset of eczema. We have crepey skin. We have poor bone density. Our hair becomes thin and brittle. We have a vitamin D level that's low. We should not have a vitamin D level that's low. When it's low, it's because we're snatching, okay? We can actually snatch and do some converting here and here, right? So if your vitamin D level is low, especially if you're still cycling and your vitamin D's levels low, it's a dead giveaway that you are a hormone snatcher. And that is a very smart body, but it is a body that needs to be replenished and nourished and not starved and not blamed and not treated poorly by yourself, by your friend, by your partner, sure as heck not by your doctor. Okay. Okay. I had a great, Anita, you made a great comment that said most people now are low in vitamin D. Let me give you the bad news about that. We have things in our environment. Plastics are definitely up there. Glycophosphates are definitely up there. Heavy metals are definitely up there that block hormone receptor sites that inhibit our body's production, self-production of vitamin D. So you're right. A lot of people have to supplement with a vitamin D. It is very important that you use a clean vitamin D because we're talking about the ability to convert and balance all of our hormones. I have a rule of thumb in my practice. Nobody has to agree with me. Maybe somebody does agree with me. Before we do hormone replacement therapy, we always do a couple of things. We first try to get a supplemental level of vitamin D so that it's adequate. Okay. We have the world's best vitamin D. Otherwise, I would not put my name on it. I sure as heck wouldn't take it. So we always make sure. So the source of vitamin D that you use can determine whether you end up with a healthy saturation level of it and an adequate ability to metabolize it. So vitamin D's, any of your fat solubles are very important to this source. We then look at things that are, like I talked about, inflammatory. So we look at things like C-reactive protein, the inflammatory hormone that definitely shows cardiovascular risk, can promote insulin resistance, and we work very hard on lowering C-reactive protein and homocysteine. The trick to that, and we are good at this, and you guys saw us on Dr. Oz, how we were able to like totally reduce somebody's triglycerides, elevate their HDL. I had 4 weeks with the doc. The docs made me retest everything. Those of you that have seen that clip, that was a funny one because boy, was that doctor not on board with us. CRP and homocysteine, the B12 folate is my trick when these are high. So I'm balancing the glucocorticoids, right? My vitamin D here. So I'm nurturing the body and nourishing the body because the body's divine in its sense to try to back convert these little gems here, progesterone and testosterone, to create stability at E2. And then we don't have the need to elevate E1. Sometimes people come in and they just dump a bunch of E2. You know, we have people that go on patches and stuff. Not opposed to patches, but I'm opposed to not knowing what the heck's going on in the metabolism of the body and just throwing one of these in. Okay. The other thing is if a person has blood inflammation like CRP and homocysteine, I use the B12 and folate. If a person has tissue inflammation, joint broken down, osteoporosis, osteopenia, arthritis, we use the free radicals and the fatty acids for that. So there's a class of hormones in the glucocorticoids called prostaglandins. You guys are going to get an endocrine degree after this. Don't forget, my fast metabolism coaches are learning all of this. So if you're struggling with your metabolism and you're struggling with staying on a program and you're struggling of knowing who, what, why, where, when, they are learning all of this in their process of becoming a metabolism coach. If they're going to have my name on it, they also have access to me, right? And we do case reviews and all kinds of things like that. So don't feel alone in this process. Some of our coaches are already on our website. We have more that are coming on the website. You want to be a coach? Please, we need you desperately because like someone said, how in the world am I going to get my doctor to even run an E1? Someone just asked that question, right? Well, as a coach, you can help your client prepare the request for care ahead of their visit and make sure that you give them all kinds of reasons why they should run an E1, an E2, an FSH, an LH, sex-binding hormone globulin, right? So sex-binding hormone globulin, I told you guys, I promised you I would get back to that really quick. That has to do, and I'm going to give like those books written on this, but I'm going to give you the way that my little pea brain could kind of sink into it. It is what goes out and invites the hormone to come to the receptor site and allows an open receptor site to be binded. It's a lot to do with this area in the liver. And especially when I have people that have really low testosterone, men that have low testosterone. I had a very young guy that came in, his testosterone was like 46, 76, kind of fluctuated in there. We tested a couple times because it was such a shocking number. We wanted to be like 800, 600. And we balanced his sex fighting hormone globulin, and we didn't have to give, he had been on testosterone injections. The problem is you can actually back convert testosterone, like I said, into E2. So his E2, his estrogen levels were so high, they put him on an aromatase inhibitor. They put him on tamoxifen. And I just went, wait a minute. You're a young guy. You're on tamoxifen. You're on testosterone injections. Your sex hormone binding globulin's high. Let's fix this and see what you can produce on your own. He still had the capacity, and we created homeostasis. We did have to do a lot of vitamin D. We had to do fatty acids to fit the building blocks for the master hormone, right? He did not have an inflammatory process. However, the thing that was interesting is he was really prone to he was a classic hormone snatcher. He had a lot of physical trauma when he was younger. He was in an auto accident. He had 7 lacerations to the liver as a kid. So his adrenals were triggered. I don't have it anymore. His E1 proliferation was high. So he back converted like a fiend. Okay. So you guys, I'm going to distill this down for a second. What do we do? I am a huge advocate of the 10-day cleanse. I'm a huge advocate of the 10-day cleanse because it cleans up the cabinet, it cleans up your palate, it gets you off sugar, it gets you off caffeine. It's still amazing. You probably lose a little bit of weight, but it is so important in creating a level playing field to start correcting homeostasis in your hormones. I'm a big advocate for testing for vitamin D and taking a D3K2. I think ours is the best in the world. If I find a better one tomorrow, you'll see me switch it in a heartbeat. But I'm a big advocate for doing everything we can do to create a homeostasis here in these. So think about the vitamin D, think about fatty acids, think about free radicals, especially if you have any tissue or autoimmune, anything that's attacking the tissue. If you're elevated CRPs, elevated homocysteine, the B, the B12 folate and methylated B12 folic acid, super critical in creating that homeostasis. If you are hyperproducing E1, you want to look at adding things like the H-burn in phase 3. Please do not abandon complex carbs and healthy fats. Because remember, fats are what make the hormones to create a homeostasis. So when we go on these crazy, fasting programs where we don't eat, we starve ourselves, and we go into ketosis, and we bypass beta oxidation, our bodies tap into the adrenal corticotrophic hormones. And when we eat again, E1 goes right through the roof. Okay. I'm going to grab a couple questions. I want to make sure, that you guys, when you come off, we're the whole group doing the 10-day cleanse together. Okay. As you come off the 10-day cleanse, I always suggest that you go on to the fast metabolism diet. If you are noticing that you are in any of the free 3 phases, normal cycling, premenopause, perimenopause, or menopause, I want you to consider asking questions in the membership section, using one of our coaches to tailor your program. We've got a lot of great blog posts, right? About hormones, about using the H-burn in phase 3, about using the cleanse in phase 3, about doing metabolism dim, especially if you're someone that is going through the change and is experiencing hot flashes. That's, one of the dead giveaways. Mine is coordination. I mean, I've never been the most coordinated person, but when I went through menopause, I was convinced that all of the door jambs in my house had been moved about a foot to the left because I hit every door jam that I walked through. And I asked my body, I was asking myself, what in the world was happening. And for me, I ran labs and I took the DIM, and we have a lot of added turmeric to our DIM. I'm a big advocate for doing DIM and turmeric together for years in clinical practice. So when we have, everybody's asking, I love your questions. Let me get to a couple of our members and challengers question. So, Kelly asked me this great question. She said, can hormone imbalance cause seizures? And not having ovaries does not having ovaries, matter in how we should eat to treat. So it's two questions. Yes, there can be a seizure component because like I was saying, our hormones are neurosignalers. So they regulate our autonomic nervous system. They regulate a lot of the neurotransmitters of our brain, serotonin, L-DOPA, PEAE, epinephrine, norepinephrine. It can depend on why the body's having seizures. Always, when we've had little peanuts, we've had little kids that have come in with seizures into our clinics. We've had adults that have come into seizures at our clinics. I have on my heart, I have a really cool client that came to me when he was a little kid, a big time seizure. To get a pediatric endocrinologist on board was kind of crazy, but we ran a whole amazing group of labs on this kid. We got his hormone homeostasis and, he drove himself to my clinic. This was 4 years after we'd gotten everything straightened out to show me his college degree. That's how long I've been doing this. And he was 12, right into that hormone, right? He was starting to get stinky feet and stinky pits, having a really hard hormone transition, and boom, he got hit with seizures. We were able to kind of line things out. He went away to college and, I'm going to cry. That was the coolest thing. He came to the clinic and you, one of my individuals that work with me in the clinic is on here right now. You know exactly who I'm talking about. So that was kind of a crazy one. So yes, without ovaries, really important because it depends on when you had your ovaries resected. If the ovectomy caused you to go into menopause or if it was post-menopause, but, either way you went into menopause, right? And yes, so I share a little bit. I went into menopause in a really weird way. I got rickettsia typhus and CMV and meningitis, and I was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks. Walked out of the hospital, totally gone through menopause, never had a period afterwards. Maybe TMI. However, it's almost like an ovectomy. So for me, I had a very strong corticotrophic response because of a very severe infection. And my E1 elevated significantly because I needed those adaptogenic hormones causing my E2 to completely shut down my ovarian function. Of course, I was in the hospital at UCLA saying, can you run this? Can you run that? Can you run this? Because I was trying to understand what's going on in my body. I did find that after that process, I have to work really hard in phase 3. I refuse to not allow my body the nutrients from complex carbs and healthy fats, but I do find that I have to add the cleanse shake a lot because I need support here. I'm also I have genetic snippets, methyl-tetrahydrofolate, reductase, homozygous, positive. So I have to work on this area really, really hard. I also have an autoimmune disorder. So I have to work on this area really, really hard. And I've been taking vitamin D since I was probably 18 years old. So I hope that's not, too much information, but you guys know I'm an open book. Okay. Next one. Hormone fluctuations women experience in menopause. I think we talked about that a lot, both in perimenopause and menopause. That hormone fluctuation is the E2 and the snatching of progesterone and testosterone. When an individual, we usually clear this area up first. We then sometimes fluctuate between adding testosterone or progesterone in, maybe even sometimes a natural progesterone is a first choice. And usually when we do that, the earlier in perimenopause that we can do it, we cycle it. So we do like a half a month, 14 days. Okay, you guys, I'm getting like the, what do you call that? The cane. People are telling me to get off. I'm talking too much. Yes, I had meningitis. It was not fun. Okay, you guys, Sherry Wright, she is one of our coaches and she had a great question. She's told that she's an amazing coach, told that she's low on testosterone, asked her doctor if he should take a hormone replacement or testosterone. She's saying that I grow hair in places I don't want. Is HRT necessary after menopause? What tests hormone-wise? Woo! Sherry asked, she can tell she's a student of all of this stuff. Okay, Sherry, let me distill it down. People don't have to do hormone replacement therapy. I would say in my practice, I did a lot in the fertility world, but I would say probably 50% of my clients do or don't do hormone replacement therapy. We test hormones all the time. I'm a big advocate of it. We have a very significant family history of breast cancer, estrogen positive breast cancer. And so I'm a big one. I test my kids' hormones, started testing their hormones as they went through more hormone fluctuations, as their hormones started to become more predominant in their lives, i.e. through adolescence. I started testing my kids' hormones at that stage. Low testosterone and taking testosterone supplements and getting hair in weird places does not have to be. You can put testosterone in places that you want to grow hair, and sometimes you grow hair, and sometimes you absolutely don't. It depends on how the body metabolizes it and how testosterone is delivered in the body. I'm a big, I like the creams personally. I know they're not the most convenient. A lot of the docs say, well, if we're going to, stabilize, and I said, that's okay. I'm okay. We have lots of blood. Let's do more testing and get it accurate. I don't like, shots, patches. If you're asking my opinion, I'm more of a transdermal, naturally compounded cream person. And I always check E2 and E1 because sometimes we need E1 vaginally to thicken the mucosal lining of the vagina without the proliferation of fat cells. So there's a tricky way to get estrogen level up without getting fluffy. Okay, last one. I went through menopause at 49, currently still having hot flashes at 73. Can you explain physiology? Is E1, 2, or 3 responsible for this horrible issue? I've been taking DIM. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. Okay. If you're still having hot flashes, we need to focus a lot on this area and this area. So there's things that I would have checked if you were my client. I would definitely check homocysteine, CRP. I would always look at your eosinophils, EOS, in your typical labs. If your eosinophils are elevated, a lot of times, it's usually like allergies or parasite we see, but sometimes with hormone imbalance, especially if an individual's been through menopause and they're still having hot flashes, we look at eosinophils. And then here in your mineralocorticoids, we look at things like aldosterone. We would look at you can go to the Food RX book, all the things in the autoimmune section. We're suspicious of things like potential Hashimoto's thyroiditis, metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Doesn't mean that you have this, Ray, but I just like to rule these kinds of things out. And always be on the high end when they run your labs out of your vitamin D, because that'll give you a chance, and make sure that you're on an adequate level of lipids. Again, I'm pro-inflammatory. I have an autoimmune disorder. I take the metabolism fatty acids. I take a lot of them. Everybody in my household laughs because I kind of eat them like candy, but it's the way that I keep my hormones stable and my adrenals supported. So I actually take 4 3 times a day, the fatty acids. I always take 2 twice a day of my B12. Again, I don't methylate, so I have to do that. I take 3 free radicals twice a day because I'm pro-inflammatory here. I used to have eczema, as you guys know, so I'm diligent about my probiotics. And there's a whole component that we'll talk about in our next challenge about the thyroid. We'll talk about insulin resistance. Each of these are going to have different things. My goal here is that when we do these 10-day cleanse challenges, so there's one you can sign up for. Please make sure that you sign up. We're going to talk about things that you can investigate within your body. Remember, our coaches are going through all of these classes with me. If you are interested in helping other people change their lives, I need help doing it. As you guys know, my clinics are to full capacity. We do not take new clients. It breaks my heart. I'm sorry, but it's my clients' families. Our clinic at IIM, we're packed and loaded with complex care cases with MACSF, Gulf War syndrome issues. Now we're bombarded with COVID long hauler in our practice there. So please, please, please consider becoming a coach. Consider engaging one of our current coaches. They're amazing human beings. You have been through the most, I think, you'll hear what you guys have to say. To me, it was the most gratifying group of students this last class. It was wonderful. And keep questioning and asking questions, you guys. It's your body, right? And as you go through the change, you want to know and be empowered and learn as much as possible about this beautiful thing we call the metabolism. It affects every aspect of our lives. If you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, making sure you're signed up for every single one of our challenges. We're always doing educational guidance, recipes, all kinds of things like that. And just know, together, we're going to try to make it a little bit easier to get through some of the bumps in the road. So, all right, guys, have an awesome night. I hope that was good. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Give me some hearts. Give me some thumbs up. Give me the wave, whatever you guys feel. Love you all. Talk soon, and goodbye.